In the remainder of this lecture, we'll look at the effects of this mountainous topography on some of the crucial borders of the Indian subcontinent. First, the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan in the west. Secondly, the border between Pakistan and India in the east. And then thirdly, some of the implications of these border issues for politics within Pakistan per se. First, a look at the Afghan-Pakistan border in the west. As explained before, this border is dominated by the western extension of the great mountain chain formed by the collision between the Indian subcontinent and Asia, forming what is known as the Hindu Kush, or a rugged mountainous terrain that extends into central Afghanistan and along the Afghan-Pakistan border. The border between these two countries, such as it is, was delineated in 1893 by a British official named Durand, who defined this border line. But the border itself, the Durand line, has never been recognized by either Pakistan or Afghanistan, and therefore exists only as a designation on a map. But in fact, as the topographical map of this region shows, this is a mountainous region, highly fragmented by separate mountain peaks, forming a very rugged terrain that is dominated by members of the Pashtun ethnicity, that is to say, people who speak a common language and have a common sense of cultural identity, but, as illustrated in this slide, live in villages that are separate from one another by high peaks and connected only by very rugged and difficult to pass mountain trails. As a consequence, the tribal divisions within this region are often quite marked, and it has been exceedingly difficult to create any sort of political unification in this region, not only for outside powers, but even for those governments that claim the territory. That is to say, governments in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan in the west, or in Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan to the east. Efforts by outsiders to intervene in the region and impose some side of control have been perennially met with disaster. The first such chapter or example we might take is the effort by the British to intervene and impose control over Afghanistan in the first British-Afghan War of 1842. On this occasion, the British, operating out of India and what is now Pakistan, sent 4,500 British regulars and 12,000 camp followers to occupy the then royal capital of Kabul, up above the mountain line in what is now Afghanistan. They were forced, after 6 months of occupation, to retreat, and in their retreat were decimated by tribal groups along the way, with the result that only one Englishman made it back, Dr. William Bryden, who in this painting by the painter Elizabeth Thompson demonstrates the sad end to the British retreat. Here Dr. Bryden is seen on his horse entering the British outpost of Jalalabad in the painting called Remnants of an Army. The British tried again to occupy Afghanistan in 1878 and again in 1919, and finally came to the realization that it was best to leave the mountain tribes alone. Another attempt was made by the Soviet Union, or the Russians, in 1979, who sent a modern military force in an attempt to take control of and bring discipline to bear on the government in Kabul. This occupation, which lasted for 10 years from 1979 to 1989, was finally overcome and the Russians forced to retreat by a native Pashtun armed forces called Mujahideen, or Holy Warriors, Islamic trained fighters who ousted the Russians just as their ancestors had ousted the British in the preceding century. After the defeat of the Russians, a subgroup of the Mujahideen, known as the Taliban, or students who had been trained in Pakistan during the struggle against the Soviets, won out in a civil war against other Mujahideen fighters to establish their government in Kabul in 1995. The Taliban regime harbored Osama bin Laden and other non-Afghan natives who created the so-called Al-Qaeda force that was responsible for the attack on September 11th, 2001 against the United States. This led to the American invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, the overthrow of the Taliban regime in Kabul, and the 10-year, now 12-year-long effort of the United States to impose some sort of control over this region. But like the British and the Russians before them, the Americans have found it exceedingly difficult to establish control over the independent, tribal, and ethnic forces that occupy the mountainous region of Afghanistan and the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, leading to the decision by the United States to withdraw all of their forces from this region in 2014.